The wind swept across the Wyoming plains in long, lonely waves, bending the tall grass beneath a pale morning sky. Miles of open land stretched in every direction around Ethan Walker's ranch, one of the largest and most successful cattle operations in the state. To most people, Ethan seemed to have everything. He owned thousands of acres of valuable land, hundreds of cattle, several businesses, and more money than he could ever spend in a lifetime. Yet every morning when he stepped onto the porch of the ranch house, he felt the same emptiness he had carried for years. 6 years had passed since his wife Hannah died in a car accident. 6 years since laughter had filled the house. 6 years since he had felt truly happy. The ranch kept him busy, but it couldn't fill the silence that waited for him every night. That morning seemed no different. He pulled on his coat and headed toward the barns before sunrise. The air was cold enough to leave clouds of breath hanging in front of him. His boots crunched over the frozen ground as he crossed the yard. Then he heard it, a faint sound. At first he ignored it, assuming it came from one of the animals. But then it came again. A weak cry, not a calf, not a lamb, a child. Ethan froze. The sound drifted through the still morning air from the direction of the old barn near the edge of the property. The structure hadn't been used in years. Most of the workers avoided it because it was falling apart. The cry came again, weak, painful, desperate. Without thinking, Ethan broke into a run. His heart pounded as he crossed the distance. The large wooden doors groaned loudly when he pushed them open. Dust swirled through narrow shafts of light. The interior smelled of old hay and weathered wood. For a moment he saw nothing. Then he heard a cough. A terrible cough. He followed the sound deeper into the shadows. Near the far wall, behind several stacks of old hay bales, he spotted movement. His breath caught. A young girl sat curled beneath a thin blanket. She couldn't have been older than 10 years old. Her face was pale. Her cheeks were hollow. Her clothes were dirty and far too thin for the cold weather. When she saw him, fear flashed across her face. She tried to stand but immediately stumbled. Ethan rushed forward. "Easy," he said softly. The girl stared at him with frightened eyes. "Please don't make me leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan knelt beside her. The moment he touched her forehead, alarm shot through him. She was burning with fever. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma." "How long have you been here?" She hesitated. "I think 3 days. 3 days. Ethan struggled to believe it. No child could survive long in those conditions. He looked around. A nearly empty bottle of water sat beside her. There was a small backpack. Nothing else. No food. No proper blanket. No sign that anyone had been caring for her. "Where are your parents?" The question immediately brought tears to her eyes. "My mom died." Ethan's heart sank. "And your father?" "I never knew him." The answer hung heavily in the cold air. For a moment neither spoke. The little girl looked exhausted, broken, terrified, and somehow still trying to be brave. "What happened?" Ethan asked. Emma lowered her eyes. "I got lost." The answer sounded rehearsed, like something she had repeated many times. Ethan knew there was more to the story. But this wasn't the time. Right now she needed help. Not questions. "Come on." She looked nervous. "Where?" "Somewhere warm." Her eyes widened. "You aren't angry?" Ethan almost smiled. "Why would I be angry?" "Because I stayed here. You were trying to survive." Tears formed again in her eyes. The simple kindness seemed to surprise her. Ethan carefully lifted her into his arms. She was shockingly light, far lighter than any healthy child should be. As he carried her toward the ranch house, she rested her head against his shoulder. Within minutes she was asleep. The doctor arrived less than an hour later. After a thorough examination, Harris stepped into the hallway. "She has a serious fever." Ethan folded his arms. "Will she be okay?" "Yes. But she's exhausted, dehydrated, and undernourished." The doctor glanced toward the guest room. "How did you find her again?" Ethan explained. "Doctor." Harris shook his head. "Poor child." After the doctor left, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table. Questions filled his mind. Who was she? Why had nobody reported her missing? How could a child end up alone in an abandoned barn? He stared through the window toward the distant fields. The ranch suddenly felt different, as though something important had changed. That evening Emma finally woke. The smell of chicken soup drifted through the room. Her eyes widened. A tray sat beside the bed. Warm soup, fresh bread, a glass of juice. She stared at the food almost suspiciously. Ethan noticed. "Go ahead." Slowly she picked up the spoon. After the first bite, her eyes filled with tears. Ethan looked away to give her privacy. But he knew exactly what he was seeing. A child who had been hungry for far too long. Within minutes she finished everything. Then she glanced at him nervously. "Thank you. You're welcome." Silence settled between them. Finally Ethan spoke. "Emma, can you tell me what happened?" For a long time she said nothing. Then the story began. 6 months earlier her mother had died from cancer. After the funeral she had been sent to live with an uncle she barely knew. At first things seemed normal. Then things changed. Her uncle drank heavily. He lost jobs. He became angry. Sometimes he forgot to buy groceries. Sometimes he disappeared for days. The more she spoke, the more Ethan's jaw tightened. The situation had clearly become dangerous. Emma described sleeping on floors, missing meals, being left alone, being blamed for problems she didn't understand. Then came the worst part. One night her uncle became furious after drinking. He shouted that he was tired of taking care of her, tired of paying for her, tired of having her around. The next morning he drove her into the countryside. He told her to wait beside a road while he checked something. Then he drove away. He never came back. Emma waited for hours. Eventually she started walking. She wandered until she found the old barn. By the time she finished speaking, tears streamed down her face. Ethan felt anger rising inside him. Not at her. At the adults who had failed her. At the man who abandoned her. At a world capable of treating a child this way. "You don't have to worry tonight," Ethan said quietly. Emma looked up. "What happens tomorrow?" The question struck him harder than expected. He honestly didn't know, but he knew one thing. He couldn't send her back. The following days passed quickly. Emma remained at the ranch while authorities investigated. The sheriff opened a case. Social workers became involved. Her uncle was located and questioned. The situation proved even worse than Ethan imagined. Several neighbors reported concerns about neglect. Others described constant drinking. No one wanted Emma returned to that environment. Meanwhile, the little girl slowly recovered. Her fever disappeared. Color returned to her cheeks. The dark circles beneath her eyes began fading. For the first time since arriving, she smiled. Then she laughed. The sound transformed the ranch. Even the toughest cowboys softened around her. Workers who rarely spoke more than necessary suddenly found excuses to stop by and say hello. Emma learned everyone's names. She helped feed chickens. She brushed horses. She followed Ethan around whenever he inspected fences. And without realizing it, she began changing him too. One afternoon they sat beside a pond near the north pasture. Emma tossed small stones into the water. "Did you always live here?" she asked. "Most of my life." She nodded. "It must be nice." "It is." She hesitated. "Were you ever lonely?" The question surprised him. Ethan stared across the water. "Yes." Emma looked curious. "Even with all this?" She gestured toward the ranch. Ethan smiled sadly. "Money doesn't stop loneliness." She considered that. "My mom used to say something like that." "What did she say?" Emma smiled. "She said people need people." The words hit him unexpectedly hard. Because Hannah used to say almost the same thing. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Emma noticed. "Are you okay?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, but the truth was more complicated." The little girl constantly reminded him of lessons he had forgotten. Lessons about kindness, about family, about love, about opening your heart. Weeks turned into months. The legal investigation continued. Social services searched for relatives. None were willing or able to care for Emma. Every option seemed temporary. Every solution felt wrong. One evening Ethan overheard a conversation between two social workers. They discussed foster placements, different homes, different counties, different schools, different strangers. Emma sat nearby pretending not to listen. But he saw fear in her eyes. That night he couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet ranch house. The old memories returned. Hannah's laughter, her dreams, the family they had once hoped to build. He entered his office. A framed photograph sat on the desk. Hannah smiled back at him. Years earlier they had spoken about adoption. After learning they couldn't have children naturally, they had discussed opening their home to someone in need. Then the accident happened. The dream disappeared, or so he thought. Now he found himself staring at the photograph. Remembering every conversation, every hope, every promise. He sat there for hours. By sunrise his decision was made. The next morning Emma joined him for breakfast. She immediately sensed something unusual. "You look nervous." Ethan laughed softly. "Maybe a little." Emma waited. "There's something important I need to ask." She set down her fork. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath. "How would you feel about staying here permanently?" Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean living here." She looked confused. "Like, forever?" He nodded. Her eyes widened. For a moment she simply stared. Then realization dawned. You're talking about adoption. Yes. The room fell silent. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? She looked completely overwhelmed. Why? The question nearly broke his heart. Why? As though she couldn't imagine anyone wanting her. As though she believed she had to earn love. Ethan reached across the table. Because your family. The tears came instantly. Emma threw her arms around him. He hugged her tightly. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Some moments were bigger than words. The adoption process took several months. Background checks. Interviews. Home evaluations. Court hearings. Ethan completed every step willingly. The social workers quickly recognized how much Emma had flourished. Her grades improved dramatically. Her health improved. Her confidence returned. Most importantly, she finally felt safe. The judge overseeing the case noticed it too. On the day of the final hearing, the courtroom filled with friends, ranch workers, neighbors, and local officials. Everyone wanted to witness the moment. Emma sat beside Ethan wearing a new blue dress. She looked nervous. Ethan squeezed her hand. You'll be fine. She nodded. The hearing itself was brief. The judge reviewed the case, asked several questions, then smiled warmly. I believe this court has reached a very easy decision. Emma held her breath. The judge signed the final documents. The adoption became official. For 1 second the room remained silent. Then applause erupted. Emma burst into tears. Ethan hugged her tightly. Years of loneliness seemed to disappear in that moment. As they left the courthouse, reporters gathered outside. The story had spread across the community. People wanted to hear from the millionaire rancher who adopted an abandoned child. One reporter stepped forward. Mr. Walker, why did you do it? Ethan glanced at Emma. She stood beside him smiling through tears. He thought carefully before answering. The truth is simple. The crowd grew quiet. I found a little girl who needed help. He paused. But somewhere along the way, I realized I needed help too. Emma smiled. The reporter looked confused. Ethan continued. I thought I was saving her. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. But she saved me. The story spread far beyond Wyoming. People wrote letters. Others donated to children's charities. Some offered support to foster programs. Many were inspired by what happened. But for Ethan and Emma, the attention never mattered. Life returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The ranch became home, real home, the kind built on love rather than walls. Years passed. Emma grew into a bright young woman. She excelled in school. She loved animals. She spent weekends riding horses across the same fields where Ethan once walked alone. The ranch workers treated her like family. Because she was family. One summer evening they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold. Emma leaned back in her chair. Do you ever think about that morning? Ethan smiled. The barn, she nodded. Sometimes. Emma stared toward the horizon. I almost didn't go inside. What do you mean? I was scared. Ethan looked surprised. Scared of what? People. The answer was honest. Painfully honest. I thought everyone would hurt me eventually. Ethan felt his chest tighten. She continued softly. But then you opened the door. For a moment neither spoke. The setting sun painted the fields with golden light. Finally Emma smiled. You changed my life. Ethan shook his head. No. She looked confused. No. You changed mine too. Emma laughed. You always say that. Because it's true. He thought about the years before her arrival. The silence. The loneliness. The emptiness. Then he looked at the young woman beside him. His daughter. The greatest blessing he never expected. The one who arrived hidden in an abandoned barn. The one whose cry had echoed across a cold Wyoming morning. The one who transformed grief into hope. The one who reminded him that even broken hearts can heal. The wind moved gently through the grass as darkness slowly settled across the ranch. Lights began appearing in distant buildings. Horses grazed peacefully in the fading sunlight. Everything felt calm. Everything felt complete. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in many years, Ethan realized something remarkable. The loneliness was gone, not because life had become perfect. Not because pain had disappeared. But because love had returned. A desperate cry from an old barn had changed everything. A frightened little girl had found a family. A lonely rancher had found a daughter. And in the vast open spaces of Wyoming, where endless skies stretched beyond the horizon, two wounded souls discovered the home they had been searching for all along.